Well, hey everybody, welcome to our first episode of How to Be a One Percenter. And I couldn't be any more delighted to have my guest, Matt Cross, today for the very first episode. A lot of you will recognize Matt Cross just from looking at him. Matt's a leading senior race caller. So if you ever watch the horse racing, you'll see Matt, or anything horse racing related, you will have seen Matt because he's been in the industry a long time. Is amazing at what he does. And firstly, Matt, thank you for being here. I think when I think of the people that could be here on my first show, our first podcast, how appropriate is it that it's you? We were just chatting earlier and realizing that it's been 8 years that we've been doing work together, and I'm just really glad you're here. So thanks for coming in and being a part of this and being on the first show.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. I appreciate it. I guess. Yeah, it's a good time for reflection, isn't it? For you and I catching up again, 8 years, and how many things have changed and what's different, I guess, for me and what's different for you and what's different for the world within that time as well. But there's been a lot happen within that 8 years. There's been a lot happen in the 22 years prior as well that, we've talked about within that 8 year period. And to get to where we are today, I'm very appreciative of the conversations that we've had along the way.
There's certainly been some fascinating and interesting and somewhat deep ones at times. And well, Matt, look, in terms of this podcast, really the idea is called How to Be a One Percenter. And but before we go down that track, it's really about not how to be the kind of one percenter that people generally talk about. It is how to be successful. And it's one of the reasons I'm really thankful you're here is because you've achieved a very high level of success. But we really want to redefine it, and you won't be surprised to hear this. This podcast and my work is really about redefining what being a one percenter is. And to me, a one percenter is somebody who's living their genuine life. It's not just the success; it's living, knowing that we're living being our genuine selves, living our genuine life, and that's what this is about, and really sharing that journey, because you'll probably agree with me that some of the things we've talked about over the last 8 years are not everyday conversations. And some of those topics that we bring up or, pathways that we go down is, they're not things that people may even know about, some of them. And this podcast is really about sharing some of those with people and how can they learn from that and get on their 1% pathway to living their greatest success in their greatest life. So I'll throw you in the deep end and just say, look, I know we've had a lot of conversations about a lot of different things, but what's one thing that comes to mind if you were to say to somebody they wanted to live their genuine life and they want to have all the success that they truly want to have? And I should stop and mention that just before we start, that I know from our conversations that you knew what you wanted to do from being 13 years old. So at 13, you discovered, I think you told me you went to a horse race, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you saw the man in the booth and you said,
correct,
that's me, that's what I want to do. And, I think one of the amazing things about you is, because you just told me, I was thinking, how old is Matt now? Because we met when you were 23, didn't we?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And you're 31. And, for somebody to know what they want, that's phenomenal. And I just can't wait to hear a bit more about that story too. And I'm sure everyone can't. But first question I have is what's one thing that stands out to you from the 1% pathway, if we call that's what we've been doing, the 1% of people that actually live the life that they truly love to live. And I know you're definitely, I'm thinking about the things now that you've accomplished and what you've done, what you've set out to do, and including recently, which you may share, your big move, literally, of a dream that you manifested. What's one thing that you would share with people about the 1% pathway? What's something important for people to know, possibly that we've discussed, or if you want to bring something out, but what's something that you would say that's something possibly new for people?
I think I could probably go down the path of comparing my career as obviously the easiest way to kind of use analogies or whatever, but I think, as you said, I was incredibly clear on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. And for me, as a young guy who was able to feel that, I'm so grateful for that, because a lot of people spend their whole life, or the most part of it, trying to figure out, what do we want to do in terms of our career. And for a lot of people, that is also a part of their identity. It doesn't become what I want to do for a job. It becomes what do you want to identify as. And for me, at that stage, I looked up, as you said, and I saw the race caller who was the iconic Rion Murtha, whom many people will know. He was the god of race calling here in Canterbury for 30 odd years. And I looked up and I thought, that's what I want to do. And ultimately that's what I want to identify as. So then I went on a pathway of trying to achieve that so that I could live my identity as a race caller. And I guess that when it come the time that I actually got the job to be able to do it, it did become my identity. Until we had conversations that, that's not me, and there's so much more outside of that I can kind of identify as. There's a lot more to life. So, yeah, I had a switch, I guess. It was Cup Week probably, I would say 4 years ago. And we had some conversations after it. I went into the week with high levels of elation and excitement, and it was where I felt good. It was where I felt like I belonged. I thought people liked me, and I just had no thought of those negativity sort of things of people don't like me, I'm not good enough, those sort of things. They were gone for that week because I was riding this incredible high. And then to come out of the week on the Monday, it was just a complete crash. It's a little bit like, for some people it might be substances, or it could be gambling, or whatever, and you get that high, but then when you come out of it, it's a long way down. So at that point was a real shifting point for me, because I had to move away from identifying as what I was doing for my job. And ultimately it's a tricky one, because a lot of people see me in that role and a lot of people don't see me. There's only, you can count on two hands people who know me in depth away from my role. So for me, that's been one of the biggest learnings from the work that you and I have done, to be able to get into that kind of 1% mindset and get away from identifying as, for me, a race caller, and going on the other hand and actually just identifying as Matt Cross.
Yeah, wow. Really appreciate you sharing that, because that's just such an important thing. A lot of people look at people in your, what you've got to, and particularly at such a young age. And I know you've, that's been something people talk to you about, which is completely awesome. But I think people don't realize sometimes the pressure that comes with it, or, from that young, having, thousands of people go, hey man, this is the guy. And then all that's finished and the party's over, so to speak, and you're at home alone and you're like, okay, well, who am I now? And so I really appreciate you being honest about sharing that, because I've seen a lot of successful people just feel that they have to keep propping that up, but the more they prop it up, the more that the other side gets louder. Sure. And that you mentioned substances and things like that. And there's a number of different things, whether it be people hide in relationships or ice cream or substances or something. It's like,
Singers are a great example. Those high-level singers, actors, as you say, they're sports players even, they feel that high level of elation, and then post-match, for want of a better term, they're looking for that to continue, and they want to feel like that all the time. And I was in the same boat.
Yeah, and you said something earlier, which is really interesting, because you said something about what you didn't have to feel. So when it was Cup Week, I'm sure everybody knows about Cup Week, but it's the big gala, like it's one of the biggest parties in all of Canterbury for the whole year. Yeah. And you were like the main focus of that, because you're the main caller for that whole thing. And you said something about that when that was over, I don't know if you said not enough, but all of those feelings that were there, that were getting covered up, just get resurfaced. And it's really interesting, because when you talk about that, that's the fantasy part, isn't it? Like with those singers. And I did a study of some of the Hollywood, I just looked into Hollywood, because I was fascinated by, these people are meant to have the looks, the money, where they do, they're the best looking people apparently on the planet, and they've got the best houses and the fame and the fortune and the adoration, and they have drug addiction, they have suicides, they have, as you say, and that it's that constant need to prop that up and to stay there, which says to me that, hey, maybe that's not actually, you're not feeling that internally, you're needing something externally to keep you going. But so I'd love to hear more. So what about that journey to genuine self? Would you be willing to say more about, or would you say identity? Would you be willing to share a bit more about what was what was that identity like, and what's some of the things that have happened to you as because I know you've done amazing work at being Matt Cross. Like, you're not Matt Cross, you're not the race caller, the senior main race caller. You're Matt Cross, who does that job now, which is that's what in our conversation. So could you share a bit more for people to what was it like? Like, what was it like in that identity, and what are some of the things that you've done to connect with who you are, and what's it like?
Well, I think ultimately it brought on a better sense of being present within what I was doing. So if I can use Cup Week for an example again, I think I've done 5 Cup Weeks now, and the first 2 or 3 I was kind of in that state of just riding the high and how awesome is this, it's brilliant. And then when you and I had the conversation afterwards and we mentioned that shift, then I was able to go back the next year and I was able to be present there versus, I don't know how to explain it, but being off in fairyland in some ways. I was for the first couple of years. So then being able to make that shift has been brilliant in the sense that I'm able to go there now. I'm able to go into the week, be present there, and don't get me wrong, I enjoy it. Like, I genuinely love it. But enjoyment and loving what you do is a totally different conversation to the feeling of elation and that overwhelming excitement, which in turn, I think, affects your work in some ways. When you're going into it, if you go in with that elation and the excitement, you're going to do a good job, but not being present, you're probably missing that little percentage at the end. So being able to be present there, I felt the year after that I went into it and I was able to be there, in a sense, to put it simply. I was there, I wasn't off in La La Land, and I enjoyed it. I was able to go home after each day, be normal, park up, go back to work the next day, enjoy that. And then come the end of the week, it was funny that I remember the conversation that you and I had afterwards, and I said to you, I was like, when I got to the Monday, I was glad it was gone. Because ultimately those weeks, and you know, you can go back to the actors and singers and rugby players, for example, in those moments where they're riding that high as such, if you want to stay there, that's an incredibly draining and ultimately becomes a dark place after a while, because we're just not built for that. We're not made to be in those situations all the time. So for me to be able to go into that week and enjoy it, come out of it and look back and think, oh, I'm so glad that's over with, is a totally different conversation year on year from what we were having. Whereas the year before I was saying to you, I just want to be back there. I want to be part of that. I want to feel like that all the time. Mm-hmm. And then the shift for me was, as I say, being able to look back and go, oh, yeah, thank goodness.
I remember the conversation that we had contacted, we had spoken, I think it was just a few days after the Cup Week, that going back some years. And I remember you just saying, look, I feel really flat now. I feel really low. And what you're bringing up here, this is just such an important topic, Matt, because in my experience of what I do, and probably you too, because you're around, people in this industry, that it's all, you're out in front of people and people are liking you. They are looking up to you. They are liking you. And I think people can sometimes get the wrong impression of that. Like, hey, that's that person's life all the time. And they don't realize the pressure, you're talking about, because I work with, rugby players and athletes and performers and people of all different kinds. And it's like, that's what everybody expects you guys to be staying there. And then you want to, because you feel so high. But I just remember you saying to me that time, you said, I just feel really flat and I feel low. And it's kind of like, I want to be back at Cup Week again. Where do you go from here? And when you have to wait another year for Cup Week, and it's like, well, it actually backfires, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, what now? Where do you go to, from there, and what's going to fill the gap? But you just said something so important, which is we're not meant to be at, our Cup Week all the time. That's meant to be a part of life. And then there's another part of life too. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So what could you say? I know we have some pretty kind of deep and different conversations, but what would you say is one thing that led you to be able to see? Because what I'm hearing you say now, and correct me if I'm speaking not correctly, but you're saying that you're not your job, and that's a thing that you really love to do when you're there, and it's something that you love to leave and live the other part of your life when that's done, and have the balance to that as well. Is that
yeah, for sure,
getting that? So what's one thing that you did to make that shift? Like how did you go from, what did you do? Because there's probably a lot of people that can relate to this and go, oh yeah, I'm always chasing highs too. It's no secret that I was addicted to drugs for some years of my earlier life. And I definitely know the chasing to feel better and the different ways we can do that. What's one thing that you did to just to claim who you are?
I think, as I said, it was that shift of looking at the week itself and looking at those phases in your life, and actually, to put it simply, looking at it and going, well, what's not great about this? I know often we'll look at situations and, we'll go the other way and we'll think, for a bad situation, how do we make it good? But for me, it was that shift of understanding that week was it's not a healthy week to be working, because your brain is in overdrive, you're concentrating the whole week. It's tough on your body, it's tough on everybody within our industry that particular week. And I think a lot of us are on the same path. But I think stepping back from that and then kind of looking at what I was going home to, or what I had for that next week, and really appreciating that those little things, going for a walk or parking up watching a show on Netflix or cooking a meal, they are the things that you really need to appreciate, because in the long run you're doing that a lot more than what you're doing. For me, it was Cup Week, so that big shift. And I think the other thing you mentioned about kind of identifying as a race caller as such, or through my time identifying as a broadcaster, and that opens up the conversation of why are we identifying as that? What are we covering up, and using that identity to try and help us? And I think that it was just for me, it was the feeling of belonging. It was the feeling of being liked. In some ways, I guess for some people it can be attention and that sort of thing. So to be able to shift away from that as well is another thing that just helps you grow and appreciate it at the time, but be able to walk away from it.
Yeah, I know one of the things that we do in our work is we question, what's happening when we feel disempowered or stressed out in any way, what's causing that. We look at the mental causes. And I remember in my own journey, one of the real big things that I got was I was really stressed out because as a business owner, and it was one of these times where, there's always ups and downs in every career, and I was really stressed out about it. And I thought, okay, well, Sridhar, stop and look at what you're stressed out about. And it was that I was fearing failure. And it was when I inquired into that, and it was a really big changing day. And you're bringing this up for me at the moment, is I just got this I had this aha moment that I'm not my business. Like until that time, it was like my business was me. If it didn't work, I'm a failure. And I was putting all that there, and I just woke up to, it's just a business. Like it's not an identity, is it? It's just what I do. It's not me. And plenty of things I've done in my life haven't worked out well, and plenty of things I've done in my life have. What it doesn't say to me, I'm a failure. But I think this is such an important conversation, Matt, because so many people, we put our identities on what we do. And therefore we need those high times. And if the inevitable challenges come up, or we are done with those times, well, who are we then? And yeah, I can't be thankful enough for you bringing this up, because that's what, this is the stuff that's so important to me. And I think it's the stuff that we don't see. I mean, my hope for this podcast was that we could surface some things that are underneath the surface that people generally don't see. It's like that we don't know. And I just really appreciate you bringing that up, because when we meet somebody at a party or whatever the case, a gathering or something, what's the first question? We say, hey, what do you do? What do you do? I'm a, race caller. I'm a.
But ultimately, is the right answer to that. If I were to say to you, what do you do? One of your first answers is probably going to be, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a friend, uncle, whatever you are. And then you say, and for work,
Isn't that's the way? I mean, that's generally what I'll do, is I go, what do you do? And I go, I do a lot of things, I'm talking to you right now. But I'm not being a smart ass. I'm like, that's really true. Like, what do? I do many things, but you're right. Yeah, for work, I do that. But how many of us actually identify ourselves with what we do? And therefore, I know, one of the things that we've spoken about, because as a public figure, people like to put you down, and people like, praise you and put you down, and they have a crack, and sometimes that's public. That all comes with the territory, doesn't it? And people have a crack at you in public, and that's not really nice. And, we've had some conversations around this, like, if our identity is put into that, well, they're insulting me, right? They're putting my identity down, when in reality, we don't even know why they're seeing what they're seeing, and they're certainly not seeing you, or they're certainly not seeing me. They're seeing something that's pushing a button or something of that nature. But isn't it just that important I just think what you're saying here is important. Isn't it so important to not be what you do? Isn't it important to not identify with that? And well, what's it like? How about the other side? So since you've done that, and I know you've done amazing work around that, like I've just watched you, really just come into who you are, and you can see it now. Like I haven't, because I don't live here in Canterbury anymore, I don't see you face to face. We see each other through a screen most of the time, but just your whole energy and grounded is the word, because centered is what I would say. So what's it like when you let that identity go? What's life like now when you just do your job and you leave and you are present to cooking and present to Netflix? How's it different?
Oh, I love going home from work and go home, and my partner Cherie, we live a pretty good life in the sense that we're both normally home at the same time. So, we go home and she works in the racing industry as well. And I think for both of us, we have an understanding that how important it is for us to go home and just be normal humans without still identifying as what we do at work. And I think it's opened up a lot of things for us both, in the sense that we've been able to concentrate a lot of that energy onto other things outside of our work, which ultimately our work is incredibly important. It pays us, we love doing it, and it takes a lot of the time during our week where they're doing that. But yeah, we have a quite a good understanding between us of the importance of stepping away from that, going home. As I said to you, this simple thing of cooking a meal and having a meal together, or going for a walk, or going to the shops and those sort of things, they become so important when you're able to shift away from that focus of needing to achieve at work. If I was still in that mindset that I was the first couple of years of doing my role, then I don't think that I would have the relationship that I do, because the portion of energy that I put into that would be put onto my work. And then obviously what goes with that lack of energy over there is the stress that brings. And then it all culminates, if you're making that identity and the job more important, then other things suffer, like your financials, your relationship, and ultimately your mental health.
I think you mentioned something earlier in the conversation, which was present. And that's a word that's kind of spoken about in my industry. It's sort of bandied around quite a bit, but it's one of the most important words, and that's what I'm hearing from you, is just being present. Because if we have those high times, like what we're calling the high times of, say, your cup week, or, for me, like I love speaking when I get to go on a stage and there's, hundreds, I love that energy, and there's, hundreds of people and I get to share something, or something like this, this is that for me, because I'm just feeling really great. And, when we have that, if the moment that we leave that's not the now anymore. Like it's the actual reality, the universe we're now living in is getting in the car, or, that's, and if we're still, like you say, and this is important, Matt, because how many people are with their partners, but not with them? I know that was me for a lot of my life. Like I'd be with my wife, but I'm, as you said, I'm still thinking about, the work, or what's the thing that I'm going to be doing tomorrow, or that thing that's going to make me feel good, or whatever the case might be. Well, aren't we missing our life then? Aren't we actually missing it? And there it is, right there, in that person that we love to have dinner with. And I sometimes say, like, what if that was your last moment? What if that was your last time you were going to be with that person? How would you feel about knowing that you were off thinking about something that wasn't even real? So
I think that's a great thing to be conscious of, what you just said there, particularly when you look at a relationship, for example. For me, I've always got that kind of thought in a way of, if you're having a rough day and say you go to work, I don't want to be driving to work and thinking, I've just been a dork at home. What if that's the last time you kind of see them, or whether it be your relationship or anybody? And I think that in some ways is a neat thing to have, is that consciousness of, what if, because ultimately, this sounds really rough, but we could die tomorrow, any of us, we could die today, and, you want to be able to cherish it.
I mean, I was here in Christchurch during the earthquake times, in 2011, on February 22nd, we're in town now, and I wasn't far from here. And, when you saw what happened, those people went to work just thinking they were going to come home. It was just a day like any other day. And I don't think either of us are trying to be morbid, but the truth is we don't know what the last time is. But I think the important thing that we're bringing up here, which I think we're both alluding to, is how often are we not present to those moments of our life because we're chasing that high instead of, or dealing with the load that came after it, instead of saying, well, hey, this is just what I'm doing now. Let me soak it in, see the good sides and the potentially the downsides of it, so we can balance that out and, not just keep chasing that same thing, but have that balance. I mean, how important is it now? Because I know you've had it for some years. How important is that balance of just going home? And I know you've said something about it, but for some reason it's coming up to ask you again, like, how important is it to just go home and, just have that quiet dinner, to be away from the limelight and to just have that time? How important is it in the scheme of your overall, satisfaction in life?
It's huge. I think for anyone in our industry, it's the same. And often I see people within the racing industry, their commitment sometimes gets the better of them and they won't take a holiday, or they're not present when they go home. And the thing about the industry that I work in is there's a lot of highs and lows. Obviously, we have horse racing. There's a lot of money involved. People win, they feel great. People lose, they don't feel so good. I think as a nation and as a community, the world is getting better at it than what we used to be. But I guess having these conversations will make it a lot better. It's a hard one. I think what I'd say to that too, Sridhar, is that it's not, for me, I'm not always 100% all the time present. And there's obviously points of, my day sometimes that I look back and go, I wish I could have done that differently. So I think what we're trying to say to people is that we're never ever going to be in that scenario where we're always 100% present. We're always saying and doing the right things. But I think if we can get on the trajectory of kind of making progress in a non-linear fashion, I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing this up. I was just having a conversation earlier with a couple of people, and they were just talking about how, because I'm a coach and consultant, I work with amazing people like you all day. And people kind of assume that I've got it all together all the time, and I'm like, no, that's not true.
You're the Buddha.
No. I'm working on it just like everybody else. But it's the thing here is it's the working on it, right? I think that's for me. That's a lot. Awareness is a big word that I like to use, because people are kind of not present. I know for me, if I use my example, definitely not present all the time. I could catch myself all the time. Well, okay, where are you? Bring yourself back. And but if I look at now compared to before, I was never present before. Like, I just didn't have any moments. Like, it was always, I had to chase something or I had to get this or that. And I was just basically never present to my life, and I was missing it. And I think it is important to say, look, this is a journey. It's not like and I'm glad you said it, because it's the 1%, how to be a 1%er. And I use the word pathways. This is about pathways for me, not some destination that is a one-off thing. So I appreciate you saying that. And but it's the focus on it though, isn't it? Like, I'm assuming it's made and I know because we speak about it, that it's made a massive difference to make that mindset shift. So there'll be a lot more of that sort of balance going on. And that's all we can hope for, is that we increase in that. I love the way you said that. Increase in that in a non-linear fashion. We just, in other words, do the best we can to be present and
I don't think anything I've gone forward in or achieved in has never been linear, in the sense that it just keeps going up. There's an old saying of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes it's 3 forward and 4 back, and those sort of things. But I think those step back, those scenarios where you look at it like it's a step back, you'll appreciate this. There are opportunities. There are opportunities to readjust and kind of make that next step, which is going to be a forward movement. And I guess learning along the way. And I think for me in my role and other things that I do in life, it's a hard thing to measure whether you're improving or not. But as you say, if you look back 2 or 3 years and kind of zone yourself into where you were, things are totally different.
Well, speaking of that, I'm going to pick your brain on one more thing, because something occurred to me. Again, we just realized that we hadn't seen each other in person for 2 years. And I got to pick your brain about, because part of what is the focus in the work that I do in my life is about creating the things we want in life. So it's always about two things, which is, we've been speaking a lot about the internal journey, but we spoke earlier about you being 13 and knowing what you want, and we all know that story, that you got there and through a lot of dedication got there at a very young age. But I'm also thinking of a conversation that you and I had, and when we were doing the work together, and you were doing so well with things and you got over some of the challenges that were happening. We said, well, hey, Matt, one of the things we do is we actually look at what you want your life to be like. And I'm trying to remember how old you were at the time, but you were mid-20s, I think. And you know the reason I'm saying this, because we wrote this down on a piece of paper, and I can't let you leave without sharing this with people, because you've created, or as we say, manifest or created everything on that list. I remember you said, do you mind if I recall some of that list? I remember you said, I just want to have this really great relationship in my life. You said, I remember it was like, you talked about the house, and I just remember this, you said, I want this house, and I can remember you said something about the picket fence kind of thing. You said, I want that. And, and you wanted the career. There were certain things that you wanted to achieve. There's some financial things that you wanted to achieve. And I think with you, I've got to pick your brain, not only because you're awesome, but because, if you can do all this at, say, between 13 and mid-20s, you know a lot about how to create the life that you really want. Because what I'm getting at is, on the last time that we had a conversation, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you were taking me on the phone around that beautiful new house that you and your partner have had built. And I'm just like, for me, it's a really lovely home, by the way. And I was just, I just got really, I got inspired, because I knew that was a moment that you had just, that's the moment that you look back on and say, look, that was all those years ago. I said I wanted that. And I'm like, look at Matt go. He's created everything in his life that he wants. So what would you say to people like this? Is because would you say, I know you're working on it, but would you say, compared to when you first saw that, you're really creating a lot of the life that you want to have, aren't you? Like your life it's good. I know you got more stuff to work on, but you've got a lot of what you stated that you wanted. And so what could you share with people? Because we all want the life that we want to have, right? We all want to be able to do that and say, well, this is what I want, and this is what I get. So what would you share with people about how you've done that? What have you applied, or what would you share with them? What's some tools for them to be able to do that for themselves?
Well, I think every one of those things that you spoke about, none of them you can just make happen like that. And when I look back, say, for example, at the house, there was a lot of steps that we put into place, and every day we were doing something that was going to put us in a position to be able to achieve that goal. So we made a call that we were going to live with my partner's parents, which was the greatest thing, and will hands down be one of the greatest things in my life that we've ever done, for a lot of reasons. The family environment, incredible. Learning off them about the dynamics of saving money and appreciating what you've got and not overspending and those sort of things. So we were able to put a lot of money away. But it was a daily thing of being conscious of, okay, how does this sit with where I see myself going with this? And then over time, we just chipped away, and we actually had a conversation. We were sitting in the house only a matter of a week ago. And I said to my partner, just have a look around the house and look at every single thing in here. There's been some thought from us put into every little bit that's in this house, from the door handles to the color of the floor to the things that are on the wall, the color of the walls. Everything was from a thought. And that thought then went into action. And obviously along the way, with the processes that we put in, we were able to achieve it. So I'm grateful that we've been able to do that. If you look, on the other hand, at the career side of things, I had a target. And for me, that target was kind of the end goal of calling the New Zealand Cup. That's the one thing that I wanted to do. And from when I was 13 to now, and obviously you kind of come along halfway through, I'd worked from 13 to say 20, 22 or 23. I always had this thought in my mind that I would just keep going on the path, and wherever the path took me, I had the belief that it was going to get me where I needed to go. And that path went veered left, it veered right, it was up, it was down, there was doubt, there was frustration. There was, a lot of frustration at points, but I always just kept going. And it took me away from what I wanted to do. And at the time I was like, okay, well, that might be it. It's over. I'm not going to be able to achieve my goal of calling races. But everything now that I look back through that period where I was frustrated has helped me be in a position where I am now. So there was always something that was helping me along the way. And then obviously you came along and I then achieved that goal, but then that started another conversation for us. Was like, okay, well, now I've achieved that. What now? Yeah. What do I do now? Like, I've done it. In my mind, I was thinking 40, 45, I'd be able to do that. And I did it at 25. So then it started a whole other conversation for us. The financial side of things, I'm still struggling to get my head around. Like, I understand how it works, but I don't understand how it works, because money attracts money. Yeah. Simple, but I cannot for the life of me, and I've thought about this long and hard, and the work that we've done, I just wish that I knew, was there some little genie up there, or? I
just say to people that it just works, doesn't it? It's when I say I don't know, we do live in a magical place. That's what people know. It's people say, oh, the world is terrible. And I'm like, you said some gold here, Matt. Like, I really hope people are listening to what you're saying, because you talked about just putting a thought forward and then consistently taking action. And no matter how frustrating it got, you kept going. How many successful people would say, I had some idea that I wanted to do and I didn't stop and I kept going like this.
Well, how many Richie McCaws are out there that we never saw play rugby?
99% of them is the sad answer to that question, and but here's what I know, because I love the work that I do, because I live in that magic all the time, because I see people like you, just doing the same thing. You put the thought forward, you take the action, when those frustrations come, you know how to deal with them. You get past the mental blocks and you keep moving, and I just keep seeing it work. And with the money side of things, it does. Like, when you have that mindset shift, because I worked really hard to try to change my financial life. And then I learned the basic principles that we spoke about. And it's like, okay, here's what I was told. If you start, managing it really well, and you have it be there, more of it's going to come to you. And I'm like, well, how does that work? Like, at that time, like, my income isn't really fluctuating, and it did. Like, money came, opportunities came. So, like I say, kind of in jest, I don't know. And to some degree, that's true. How does this amazing world work? But the thing for me is, how many people aren't finding out? That's the purpose of this podcast, Matt. How many people are not finding out that it works that way? How many people are just giving up on that dream, that Richie McCaw that didn't make it? What a sad thing for that, when their life could actually have been everything that they wanted it to be. So,
and you can start anywhere with any of that stuff. I know it might be easy for someone to say who, might have a bit of money in the bank, or comes from a good financial background, but I would say in some cases those people are at a disadvantage because they've already got it, and you might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that. I think when you look at successful people around the world, a lot of those successful people have come from nothing. And then you see people from successful families who go to nothing. So it can sometimes be an advantage when you're sitting there and thinking, well, I've got nothing, I don't have money, my family don't have money, I'm not good at anything, those sort of things. That can be a huge tool.
Oh, gosh, man, the gold just keeps coming in this way. There was, for a first podcast, you're just really bringing it. Thank you. Yeah, because I'm thankful every day. For one of my practices is just take a moment to be appreciative of things in my life. That's actually a powerful attractor in and of itself. Is, the more we complain, it's not true. The more we get, the more appreciative we are, the more we get. And, I'm thankful for each and every day. Like, I don't try to make it happen. I just get present to what I'm appreciative of. And one of those things is my challenging times in life. I'm actually thankful for my addictive years, when I was on the drugs earlier on in that, because when people are handed everything, like, how do they develop desire? How do they develop, in the brain? How do they develop drive? How do they develop why do they want to dream? Everything was just given to them. They have nothing. So, and because it was given to them, they don't learn to do what you're talking about. They don't learn to manage it. They're just like, well, hey, life will just give me everything all the time. So they'll go and blow it. And then, a lot of those people end up the parents that were doing that might die, or they run out of money, or whatever the case might be, they're in trouble then, because then there's nothing in there. I mean, sometimes it's the catalyst that gets them to then, get driven or something, but they're at a huge disadvantage. And, one of the things that we, as we've done in our work is to find those early challenges that we had and harness them, really realize that, hey, those weren't bad things. They might have seemed bad, but they actually served you. They're a part of what got you to be the person that you are and have the dreams that you have and follow them. So yeah, it's quite important, but I think this is why I'm so thankful you're here, because I can talk about it. But if I'm just one person saying, hey, this world is magical. If you just commit to what you want in life, you're going to start getting everything to help it. And if you start taking care of wealth, you'll find more is going to come to you. And if you take care of your focus on your relationship, it's going to get, there'll be ups and downs, but it'll get better. If you want that house and you stay focused on it, it's like things will happen to allow you to get it. And the best I can say is that my experience is whatever it is, is it a genie? Is it a world? I just think we live in a lot of us don't understand how amazing this world was actually created, and that we're creators. That's what we're doing. We're here to create.
I think too, if I can take you back to the moment where I had, I don't know if an epiphany is the word, but when I got that overwhelming feeling of like, that's me, that's what I want to do. I think where some people come unstuck is people experience that, but then moments later the doubt kicks in and shuts it down. I think the key is to be able to shut that doubt out. There's obviously going to be some things in the world that just aren't meant for you, but I think in that scenario, if you get that really, overwhelming is probably not the word, but that clarity, I think. If you have a moment of clarity where you know that that's what you want to do, I would say to push through the doubt and just keep going.
If I said to you, like, really realize, question that doubt and find out what's behind it, and realize that that's not even something you need to doubt, that's...
Well, more often than not, it's thinking what other people will think about you.
Yeah. And who cares at the end of the day? Like, should that stop you from doing what it is that you really want to do? Well, this is Matt. He's just such an inspiring guy, and I can't say thanks enough for making the time to be here and to help me launch this podcast. It couldn't have been done in a more beautiful way. So thanks for what you've brought. You've just afterwards, I tend to dissect this and just kind of say a little bit more about some of the things, so people can hopefully go forward in their own lives from some of the things that you share. But there's so much gold in this one already. Just thinking about it, you've just brought so much gold to us. So look, it's just such a pleasure to know you and to have the conversation we've had for 8 years now, and to see what's happened with your life. So what an awesome experience. It's a great pleasure. And thank you for coming on and being
Pleasure's mine.
If you're a part of that.